Chosen one, there is something about you right now that people cannot quite explain. Something in the way your life is moving, in the way your progress is unfolding, in the way your ideas are becoming real at a pace that feels almost unnatural to those watching from the outside. And to them, it looks like you made some kind of deal with time itself. Like you skipped steps, like you jumped ahead while they were still trying to figure out where to begin. And because they cannot see the process that brought you here, the only word they have for it is unreal, or worse, delusion. As if what you are living now could not possibly be grounded in something real. But you know the truth is far different. You know this did not happen overnight. You know this was built in moments no one was watching, in decisions no one noticed, in consistency that did not look impressive at the time, but kept stacking quietly until it became something undeniable. This message is not here to flatter you. It is here to wake you up to what is actually happening. Because if you don't understand this phase, you risk underestimating it. And this is not the time to underestimate yourself. Stay with this. Don't scroll past. Because what you are experiencing right now is a shift that most people miss when it happens to them. And if you can recognize it clearly, you will move with it instead of questioning it. So take a second, lock in, and if this is already resonating, go ahead and like this video. Drop "I see it now" in the comments and stay fully present. Because what comes next will explain exactly why your reality feels like it is moving ahead of everyone else's, and why that is not an accident. And it began long before anything visible started to change. In a phase where what you could see in your mind did not match what existed in your physical reality. Where your vision felt ahead of your circumstances in a way that was both powerful and isolating at the same time. Because you were holding on to something that had not yet taken form. Something that could not be proven. Something that could not be shown to others in a way they would immediately understand. And this gap between what you saw internally and what existed externally became one of the most defining parts of your journey. You were not operating from what was in front of you. You were operating from what you knew could exist, from a sense of direction that did not rely on current evidence. And that alone placed you in a different position than most people around you. Because while they were responding to what was visible, you were responding to something that had not yet arrived. Something that required belief before confirmation, consistency before validation, movement before results. There were moments where this felt uncertain, where you questioned whether what you were seeing was real or just something you wanted to believe in. Because without external proof, the mind naturally looks for something to anchor itself to. And when that anchor is not present, doubt can begin to form. Not loudly, but quietly, in the background, asking whether you are moving in the right direction or simply imagining something that may never take shape. But even in those moments, something in you did not let go. Something continued to hold on to that vision. Not in a forceful or desperate way, but in a steady, consistent way that allowed you to keep moving forward even when you could not fully explain why. This is where most people turn back. This is where they adjust their vision to match their current reality, where they lower their expectations to fit what is immediately achievable, where they choose certainty over possibility, because it feels safer, because it feels more grounded, because it does not require them to move without proof. But you did something different. Even if you did not fully realize it at the time, you allowed your vision to remain ahead of your circumstances. You allowed yourself to exist in that gap without collapsing it prematurely. And that decision, though it may have felt small in each individual moment, is what created the foundation for everything that followed. You were not just imagining something, you were aligning with it. You were gradually shaping your actions around something that did not yet exist in visible form. And that alignment is what gave your vision weight. what made it more than just an idea. Because you were not waiting for it to become real before you acted. You were acting as if it already had direction, as if it already had structure, as if it already had a place in your life that you were moving towards step by step. There were people who did not understand this, people who saw your actions and could not connect them to immediate results. People who heard your ideas and could not see how they would translate into something real. And from their perspective, it may have looked unrealistic, impractical, even delusional, because they were measuring your vision against your current reality, rather than against the direction you were moving in. They were looking for proof in the present, while you were building something that would only reveal itself over time. And this difference in perspective is what created the disconnect. Because what made sense to you did not yet make sense to them. Not because it was not real, but because it had not yet reached a stage where it could be recognized externally. And in that space, you had a choice. A choice to either adjust your vision to fit their understanding, or to continue moving forward with what you saw, even if it meant being misunderstood for a period of time. Even if it meant holding on to something that could not yet be validated. You chose to continue. Not necessarily with complete confidence at every moment, but with enough consistency to keep the direction intact. Enough trust to not abandon what you were building simply because it was not yet visible. And that consistency is what most people underestimate. Because it does not look significant in the moment. It does not create immediate results that can be celebrated or recognized. It often feels repetitive, slow, even uncertain at times. But it is exactly what allows a vision to transition from something imagined to something real. Because it creates momentum. And momentum is what bridges the gap between where you are and where you are going. You were not moving randomly, even when it felt like there was no clear confirmation. You were moving in alignment with something you could see internally, and that alignment guided your decisions, your focus, your actions in ways that gradually shaped your reality to match that vision. There were days where nothing seemed to change, where the effort you put in did not produce visible results, where the gap between your vision and your current situation still felt wide. And in those moments, it would have been easy to question everything, to slow down, to stop, to redirect your energy into something more immediately rewarding. But instead, you continued. Not because it was easy, not because it always felt certain, but because something in you recognized that consistency over time would eventually produce what could not be seen in the moment. That what you were building was not meant to appear instantly, but to develop through repeated action, through sustained focus, through a willingness to keep going even when the external reality had not yet caught up. And this is where time begins to play a different role. Because while others may have been measuring progress based on immediate outcomes, you were investing in something that required accumulation, something that required time to compound, something that would only reveal its full effect after enough consistent effort had been applied. You were not trying to rush the process, you were moving with it, allowing it to unfold in a way that matched the depth of what you were building. And that patience, though it may not have felt like an advantage at the time, is what created the conditions for your reality to eventually shift in ways that now appear sudden to others. They see the outcome, but they did not see the phase where nothing seemed to be happening, where your vision existed without evidence, where your actions did not yet produce visible change. And because they did not see that part, the current moment looks like it happened quickly, like it skipped steps, like it arrived without the process that made it possible. But you know that is not the case. You know that every step, every moment of consistency, every decision to continue when it would have been easier to stop, contributed to what is now becoming visible. And that understanding is what allows you to move forward with confidence. Because you are not relying on luck or sudden change. You are building on a foundation that was created long before anyone else could see it. And this is what it means when your vision did not match your reality at the beginning. It means you were ahead of your circumstances. Not in a way that disconnected you from reality, but in a way that allowed you to shape it over time, to move towards something that had not yet taken form, to trust a process that required patience and consistency before it could be recognized externally. And now, as things begin to align, as your internal vision starts to reflect in your external reality, it may look like something extraordinary to those who did not see the beginning. But to you, it is the natural result of what you have been doing all along. The unfolding of something that was always there, waiting to be built, step by step, moment by moment, until it could no longer be ignored. And as that vision continued to live within you, quietly shaping your direction even when there was no visible confirmation, what followed was a phase that many people misunderstood. A phase where your behavior began to look different, where your consistency began to stand out, not because it was loud or dramatic, but because it was relentless in a way that others were not used to seeing. And this is where what you were doing started to be labeled in ways that never fully captured its purpose. Because from the outside, it did not look like alignment. It looked like obsession. You were showing up when there was no immediate reward. You were repeating actions that did not yet produce visible results. You were investing time and energy into something that could not be proven in the moment. And for someone who measures effort by immediate return, that kind of behavior does not make sense. It appears excessive, unnecessary, even irrational. But what they could not see was the structure behind your consistency, the intention behind your repetition, the quiet understanding that what you were building required accumulation, not instant validation. You were not repeating actions blindly. You were refining them, adjusting them, strengthening them with each iteration. And this is what separates discipline from obsession. Because obsession chases outcomes without structure, while discipline builds structure regardless of immediate outcomes, trusting that results will follow the consistency applied over time. There were moments where it felt repetitive, where doing the same thing again and again without visible progress tested your patience, tested your belief in what you were building, tested whether you would continue when there was no external confirmation that you were on the right path. And this is where most people stop. Not because they lack ability, but because they require proof before they are willing to continue. They need to see results to justify their effort. And when those results are not immediate, their consistency fades. Their focus shifts. Their direction changes. But you stayed, even when it felt like nothing was changing. Even when your effort did not yet reflect in your reality. Even when the gap between where you were and where you were going still felt wide. And that decision to stay consistent when there was no guarantee of immediate reward is what began to separate your timeline from everyone else's. You were not just spending time, you were investing it. You were using it with intention, placing it into something that would compound rather than something that would fade. And that compounding effect is what most people underestimate, because it does not show itself in the early stages. It builds quietly, beneath the surface, strengthening the foundation before anything becomes visible. You may have noticed how small improvements began to stack, how each repetition made the next one more efficient, how each adjustment brought you slightly closer to what you were aiming for, even if the overall result was not yet obvious. And over time, those small shifts began to accumulate into something that could no longer be dismissed as insignificant. This is where your discipline started to create momentum. Not in a sudden or explosive way, but in a steady, increasing way that made each step slightly easier than the last, each action slightly more effective, each decision slightly more aligned with the direction you were moving in. And while others were starting and stopping, shifting their focus based on immediate outcomes, you were building continuity. You were creating a flow that did not break, a rhythm that carried you forward even when motivation fluctuated, because you were no longer relying on how you felt in the moment to determine whether you would act. You were relying on the structure you had built, on the commitment you had made to your direction. This is where discipline becomes powerful, not because it forces you to act, but because it removes the need to decide whether you will act. It becomes automatic, integrated into how you move, how you think, how you engage with your goals. And from the outside, this can look extreme. It can look like you are doing more than necessary, like you are pushing harder than required, like you are investing more than is reasonable. But what they are seeing is not excess. It is alignment. It is the natural expression of someone who understands that consistency is what bridges the gap between vision and reality. You were not waiting for the right moment. You were creating it through repetition, through sustained effort, through a willingness to continue even when the results were not yet visible. And that willingness is what most people struggle to maintain, because it requires trust. Not blind trust, but informed trust. Trust built through observation, through recognizing that each action contributes to something larger, even if that contribution is not immediately apparent. There were times when it would have been easier to slow down, to take breaks that extended longer than necessary, to redirect your energy into something that offered quicker results, something that felt more rewarding in the short term. But you resisted that pull, not by force, but by clarity, because you understood that what you were building required consistency over time, that breaking that consistency would slow the momentum you had worked to create, and that maintaining it, even when it felt repetitive, was what would eventually allow everything to align. And this is where your relationship with time began to change, because you were no longer measuring it by how quickly results appeared. You were measuring it by how effectively you used it, by how consistently you applied it, by how well you aligned your actions with the direction you had chosen. Time was no longer something you waited on. It was something you worked with, something you shaped through your consistency, something that responded to the way you engaged with it, rather than something that determined your progress on its own. And as this continued, the gap between you and others began to widen, not in a way that was immediately visible, but in a way that became more apparent over time. Because while they were restarting, recalibrating, shifting directions, you were building on what you had already established, adding to it, strengthening it, allowing it to grow in a way that could not be matched by inconsistent effort. They may not have noticed it at first, because the difference was not dramatic in the beginning. But as time went on, the accumulation of your discipline began to show. The results of your consistency began to surface, and what once looked like obsession now began to look like precision, like focus, like something that was clearly intentional rather than excessive. But by the time they recognized it, you were already ahead. Not because you moved faster in a single moment, but because you moved consistently over many moments. Because you stayed when others stopped. Because you continued when others questioned whether it was worth it. Because you understood that what you were building required time to reveal itself, and you were willing to give it that time without losing your direction. And this is what makes it look like you made a deal with time. Because from the outside, the results appear to have arrived quickly, to have skipped the stages that others struggle through. But what they are actually seeing is the outcome of discipline that was applied long before those results became visible. the result of consistency that compounded quietly until it reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. You did not rush the process. You aligned with it. You worked with it. You allowed your discipline to shape it. And now, as things begin to accelerate, as your results begin to reflect the effort you have been putting in, it may look like something extraordinary to others, but to you, it is simply the natural progression of what you have been doing all along. The unfolding of something that was built through patience, through repetition, through a level of consistency that transformed what once looked like obsession into something undeniably real. And while your discipline continued to build quietly in the background, shaping your direction with a consistency that few people could see or fully understand, there was another shift happening at the same time. One that did not announce itself, but gradually separated your path from the pace of those around you. And that shift was in how you chose to move when others hesitated, how you acted when others delayed, how you made decisions in moments where most people paused, waited, or second-guessed themselves. It was not that you had more certainty than everyone else at the beginning. It was that you were willing to move without needing complete certainty, willing to take steps even when the outcome was not guaranteed, willing to act on the direction you felt instead of waiting for perfect conditions to appear. This is where momentum begins to form, not from a single big action, but from a series of small decisions made consistently over time. Decisions that may not seem significant individually, but collectively create a trajectory that becomes increasingly difficult to match. You were not waiting for everything to align before you started. You were aligning as you moved, adjusting along the way, refining your approach based on what you learned through action rather than what you imagined in stillness. And this is what most people struggle with. Because hesitation feels safe, waiting feels controlled, delaying feels like a way to avoid mistakes. But in reality, those pauses create gaps. They break continuity. They prevent momentum from building. And without momentum, progress remains slow, inconsistent, and easily disrupted. You chose a different approach, even if you did not fully articulate it at the time. You chose movement over hesitation, action over delay, engagement over overthinking. And that choice, repeated over and over again, began to separate your timeline from those who were still trying to decide when to begin. There were moments where acting felt uncomfortable, where stepping forward without full clarity required trust, where making a decision without knowing exactly how it would unfold created a sense of risk. But you did not let that stop you. You moved anyway. Not recklessly, but intentionally, guided by the direction you had already established through your vision and your discipline. And each time you moved, you gained something that those who hesitated did not. You gained feedback. You gained experience. You gained information that could only be accessed through action. And that information allowed you to adjust, to refine, to improve in ways that could not be achieved through thinking alone. While others were still analyzing possibilities, you were testing them. While they were considering options, you were exploring them. While they were waiting for clarity, you were creating it through movement. And this is where your progress began to accelerate. Not because you were moving faster in each individual moment, but because you were moving more consistently. Because you were not stopping and restarting. Because you were not breaking your own momentum with hesitation. You may not have noticed the difference at first, because it was gradual. Because the results of this approach do not appear immediately. But over time, the gap began to widen. The distance between where you were and where others remained became more apparent. Not in a way that needed to be measured, but in a way that could be felt. In the way your progress began to stack, while theirs remained inconsistent. And from their perspective, It may have looked like you were moving ahead suddenly, like something shifted quickly in your favor, like you gained an advantage that they did not have. But what they did not see was the accumulation of all those small decisions, all those moments where you chose to move instead of wait, all those times where you took action while they were still deciding whether to act at all. This is what creates the illusion that you made a deal with time, because when momentum reaches a certain point, it begins to produce results at a pace that appears faster than expected. But that speed is not coming from nowhere. It is coming from everything that was built before. From every moment of action that added to your trajectory. From every decision that kept you moving forward instead of holding you in place. You were not trying to get ahead. You were simply not staying still. And that alone was enough to create a difference. Because most people spend more time preparing to move than actually moving. More time thinking about what they will do than doing it. More time waiting for the right moment than realizing that the right moment is created through action. You did not wait for the perfect conditions. You moved within the conditions you had. And in doing so, you created new conditions. You opened new paths. You discovered opportunities that only exist for those who are already in motion. And as this continued, your confidence began to shift. Not from external validation, but from experience. From seeing that your actions led to results. From recognizing that movement created clarity. From understanding that you did not need to have everything figured out before you began, because the process itself would provide what you needed along the way. This confidence is different from the kind that comes from reassurance. It is built through repetition, through seeing yourself move forward again and again, through proving to yourself that you can navigate uncertainty without being stopped by it. And this is where your mindset begins to align fully with your actions, where you are no longer questioning whether you should move, but focusing on how you will move, where the energy that once went into hesitation is now directed into execution, into refinement, into building on what you have already started. You are no longer at the beginning, you are in motion, and that motion is what continues to carry you forward, what continues to separate your path from those who are still waiting, still hesitating, still trying to find the perfect moment to begin. And as you look back, you may begin to see how small those initial decisions seemed, how insignificant they appeared at the time, how easy it would have been to delay them, to push them aside, to wait until you felt more ready. But those are the very decisions that created the difference. The ones that seemed minor but carried weight over time. The ones that built your momentum step by step until it reached a point where it could no longer be ignored. This is why it now looks like you are ahead, like you moved faster, like you gained something others did not. But the truth is, you simply moved when others did not. You continued when others paused. You acted when others hesitated. And that consistency in action is what shaped your timeline, what allowed you to progress in a way that now appears accelerated, even though it was built gradually, moment by moment, decision by decision, until it became something undeniable. And then there comes a moment, not always loud or dramatic, but unmistakable when you recognize it, where everything you have been building internally and reinforcing through your discipline and your consistent action begins to surface in a way that others can finally see. A moment where your reality starts catching up with your vision, where what once lived only in your mind begins to take form in your external world. And this is where the entire dynamic shifts. Not because you suddenly changed what you were doing, but because what you have been doing has reached a point where it can no longer remain invisible. At first, it may appear subtle. Small confirmations that what you were building is starting to materialize. Signs that your direction is aligning with tangible outcomes. Moments where you realize that something you once had to imagine is now becoming something you can experience. And these moments carry a weight that is difficult to explain to anyone who did not witness the phase where nothing was visible. Because for you, they are not surprising. They are expected. They are the natural result of everything you have been doing. But for others, they appear sudden, unexpected, almost as if they arrived out of nowhere. This is where the contrast becomes clear. Because while you have been living in the process, they are only seeing the outcome. While you have been building the foundation step by step, they are only noticing the structure once it is visible. And this difference in perspective creates a sense of confusion for them, because what they are seeing does not match what they remember of your starting point. They remember when your ideas seemed distant, when your actions did not yet produce results, when your direction was not fully understood. And now they are seeing something that appears to have skipped those stages. Something that looks complete, or at least significantly advanced, compared to where you once were. And this is where their perception begins to shift, from doubt to curiosity, from dismissal to attention. Because what they once questioned is now something they cannot ignore. You may begin to notice how the same people who did not fully understand your vision are now observing your progress more closely. How their tone changes, how their questions become more specific, how their attention becomes more focused. Not necessarily because they suddenly understand everything, but because they can no longer deny that something has changed, that something has moved from the realm of possibility into the realm of reality. And this shift in how they perceive you is not something you need to react to. It is simply a reflection of the timing difference between when you started building and when they started noticing. Because what is new to them is not new to you. What appears sudden to them is the result of a long process that you have been moving through consistently. This is also where you begin to see the true nature of momentum. Because once your internal vision and your external reality begin to align, the pace of progress often appears to accelerate. Not because you are suddenly doing more, but because the foundation you built is now supporting visible growth, allowing each action to produce more noticeable results, allowing each step to carry more weight than before. It is like a structure that has reached a point where it can now expand upward, where each addition becomes more visible because the base is already strong. And from the outside, this expansion looks rapid. It looks like something that is happening all at once. But in reality, it is the result of everything that came before. Everything that was built when no one was watching. Everything that was developed before it could be recognized. You may also begin to feel a shift within yourself during this phase. A sense of confirmation that what you believed in is now becoming real. A reinforcement of your trust in your own direction, your own process, your own ability to see beyond what is immediately visible. And this internal shift is just as important as the external one, because it solidifies your confidence, not in a way that makes you complacent, but in a way that strengthens your alignment, allowing you to continue moving forward without needing constant reassurance. You are no longer questioning whether what you are building is possible. You are experiencing it, and that experience changes how you approach everything that follows, because it removes a layer of uncertainty that once required you to rely solely on belief. Now, belief and experience are working together, reinforcing each other, creating a level of clarity that is both grounded and expansive. At the same time, this phase can also bring new challenges, not in the form of obstacles that stop you, but in the form of adjustments that require you to remain focused. Because as your reality begins to reflect your vision more clearly, the attention around you may increase, the expectations may shift, the environment may respond differently to your presence. And this is where it becomes important to stay aligned with the process that brought you here, rather than being distracted by the recognition that comes with it. You are not here to prove anything to anyone. You are here to continue building, to continue refining, to continue moving in the direction you have already established. Because the moment you shift your focus away from that process and toward external validation, you risk disrupting the momentum that allowed you to reach this point in the first place. And this is where your discipline, your consistency, and your awareness all come together. Because they allow you to navigate this phase without losing your center, without being pulled into reactions that do not serve your direction, without allowing the external recognition of your progress to change the internal structure that created it. You may also begin to see how your journey now serves as a reference point for others, not because you intended it to, but because your results provide evidence of what is possible. And while some may be inspired by this, others may struggle to understand it, may question how it happened, may try to find explanations that fit within their current understanding. And this is where the idea of delusion often appears, not as a reflection of your reality, but as a reflection of their inability to fully grasp the process that led to it. They did not see the discipline, the consistency, the action, the patience. They are seeing the result. And without the context of the process, the result can appear unrealistic, exaggerated, or disconnected from what they believe is possible. But you know the truth. You know what it took to reach this point. You know that this is not something that appeared out of nowhere. You know that it is the outcome of a path you have been walking for a long time. And that understanding is what keeps you grounded, what prevents you from being influenced by how others interpret your progress. You are not here to fit your journey into their perspective. You are here to continue your journey, to allow it to unfold in a way that remains aligned with what you have built, with what you understand, with what you know is possible, because you are already experiencing it. And as this phase continues, as your reality and your vision align more fully, you begin to realize that this is not the final stage. It is another step, another level, another point in the process where what was once internal becomes external, where what was once imagined becomes real. And this cycle continues, expanding your understanding, refining your approach, allowing you to move forward with a clarity that is no longer based on possibility alone, but on experience, on evidence, on the undeniable reality that what you see and what you build are now moving together, creating a path that is both visible and continuously evolving at the same time. And as your reality continues to align with everything you once held internally, as the results of your discipline and your consistent movement begin to show themselves in ways that can no longer be dismissed or overlooked, you may start to notice something else unfolding around you. Something that at first feels subtle, but becomes clearer the more you observe it. And that is the way others begin to interpret what is happening in your life. Because while you understand the process that brought you here, while you have lived through the phases that built this momentum step by step, most people have not seen that part. They have only seen the outcome. And when someone is faced with a result they cannot trace back to a visible process, their mind naturally tries to make sense of it using the only references it has. And when those references are limited, the explanation often becomes distorted. This is where the idea of your reality being unreal or even delusional begins to appear. Not because what you are experiencing lacks substance, but because it exists outside of what others have personally experienced or believe to be possible within their own framework. They are not comparing your journey to your starting point. They are comparing your results to their current position. And from that perspective, the gap feels too large, too sudden, too disconnected from what they understand about progress. And so their interpretation adjusts to fit their understanding, not your reality. You may hear comments, subtle or direct, that question how quickly things have changed for you, that imply that what you are doing is unrealistic, that suggest that your expectations or your direction are not grounded in something real. And at first, this can feel confusing. Because from your perspective, everything that is happening makes sense. It is the natural progression of what you have been building. It is the outcome of the time, effort, and consistency you have invested. But from their perspective, it appears as if you have skipped steps, as if you have arrived at a place without going through the process that they believe is necessary. And this is where understanding perception becomes important, because people do not see reality as it is, they see it as they understand it. They interpret it through their own experiences, their own limitations, their own beliefs about what is possible and what is not. And when something falls outside of that understanding, it is often labeled in a way that allows them to maintain their current perspective without needing to expand it. It is easier to call something unrealistic than to reconsider what is possible. It is easier to dismiss something than to question whether their own approach or understanding might be limited. But this does not change what is real. It only reflects how it is being perceived. You begin to realize that their interpretation is not a reflection of your reality. It is a reflection of their position relative to it. And once you understand that, it becomes easier to remain grounded in your own experience, without being influenced by how others describe it. You are not here to fit your progress into their expectations. You are not here to slow down your alignment so that it becomes easier for others to understand. You are here to continue moving in the direction you have been building, to trust the process that has already proven itself through your own experience. This is also where your awareness deepens, because you start to see that perception itself is limited by exposure, that people can only recognize what they have seen or experienced enough times to accept as possible. And when something appears outside of that range, it is often rejected or redefined rather than explored. You may notice that those who have experienced similar levels of discipline, consistency, or long-term alignment are more likely to understand what you have done, not because your journey is identical, but because they recognize the structure behind it. They understand that results that appear sudden are often the result of processes that were not visible. They know that what looks like a leap forward is often the accumulation of many small steps taken consistently over time. But those who have not engaged with that process may struggle to see it, not because they are incapable, but because they have not yet built the reference points that would allow them to recognize it. And this is where your clarity becomes essential, because you cannot rely on external validation to confirm what you already know through your own experience. You cannot allow others' interpretations to redefine your understanding of what you have built, because if you do, you risk disconnecting from the very process that brought you here. You begin to understand that being misunderstood is not a sign that something is wrong. It is often a sign that you are operating at a level that is not yet familiar to those around you, that your timeline is not aligned with theirs, that your process has taken you to a place they have not yet experienced. And this does not mean you separate yourself or see yourself as above others. It simply means you remain aligned with your own path without needing everyone else to fully understand it. You can still engage, still connect, still communicate, but you do so without needing to adjust your reality to fit their perception, without needing to explain every step in a way that makes it comfortable for them. You are not here to be validated by those who did not walk the same path. You are here to continue walking your own, to continue building, to continue refining, to continue moving forward in alignment with what you know is real because you have lived it. And as this continues, you may also begin to see that their perception will change over time, not necessarily because you explain it to them, but because your results will continue to reinforce themselves. Because consistency over time is difficult to deny. Because what once looked unrealistic becomes normalized as it continues to exist, as it continues to grow, as it continues to demonstrate that it is not a temporary or imagined state, but something grounded in real, repeatable actions. What they question today may become what they accept tomorrow, not because you convince them, but because reality itself provided the evidence they needed to adjust their understanding. And this is why you do not need to rush their perception. You do not need to force them to see what you see, because your role is not to manage how others interpret your journey. Your role is to continue your journey, to remain aligned with the process that is already working, to allow your results to speak through consistency rather than explanation. You are not here to prove that what you are doing is real. You are here to continue doing it, to continue building, to continue moving in a way that reflects your understanding. Because the truth does not need to be defended when it is consistently lived. And this is where your confidence becomes stable, not dependent on agreement, not shaken by misunderstanding, but grounded in your own experience, in the knowledge of what it took to get here, in the clarity of what you have built and what you continue to build. You are no longer questioning whether what you are doing is valid. You are recognizing that it is, because it is producing results, because it is aligned with your direction, because it is consistent with the process that brought you here. And as you continue forward, you carry that understanding with you, allowing it to guide you, allowing it to protect your focus, allowing it to keep you grounded even when others cannot fully see what you see. Because you know that what matters is not how it appears from the outside, but how it is built from within. And that is something only you can truly understand. Because you are the one who lived it, step by step, moment by moment, until it became what it is now. And as everything continues to unfold, and your results become more visible, more undeniable, more aligned with the vision you once carried quietly within yourself, there comes a deeper realization that begins to anchor everything you have experienced into a clearer understanding. And that realization is this: you did not bend time. You did not skip it. You did not make some kind of shortcut that others could not access. You simply used time differently. You engaged with it in a way that most people do not, and because of that, it responded to you in a way that now appears extraordinary from the outside. This is where the illusion begins to dissolve, because what looks like acceleration is actually alignment. What looks like a leap is actually accumulation. What looks like something sudden is the result of something sustained. And once you see this clearly, you begin to understand that time itself was never working against you. It was always responding to how you chose to move within it. Most people treat time as something to wait on, something that must pass before things change, something that controls when results can appear. And because of that, they remain passive in their relationship with it. They delay action. They postpone effort. They assume that progress will happen simply because enough time has gone by. But you approached it differently. Whether consciously or not, you treated time as something to work with, something to invest into, something that responds to consistency, to repetition, to focused effort applied over long periods without interruption. You did not wait for time to create results. You used your actions within time to shape those results. And that shift, though it may seem simple, is what created the difference between where you are now and where others remain. You were not looking for shortcuts. You were building pathways. You were not trying to speed things up artificially. You were allowing them to develop naturally through sustained effort. And that natural development is what created the foundation for what now appears as rapid progress. This is where the relationship between consistency and time becomes clear. Because time alone does not produce results. It is what is done within that time that determines the outcome. And you filled your time with aligned action, with repetition that built skill, with focus that refined your direction, with decisions that moved you forward instead of keeping you in place. While others were allowing time to pass without fully engaging with it, you were using it, shaping it, directing it through your actions. And over time, that difference began to compound. Not in a way that was immediately visible, but in a way that built momentum beneath the surface. And this compounding effect is what most people fail to recognize. Because it is slow at first, it does not produce dramatic results in the beginning. It requires patience. It requires consistency. It requires a willingness to continue even when the progress is not obvious. But once it reaches a certain point, it begins to accelerate. It begins to produce results at a pace that feels disproportionate to the effort being applied in the present moment. And that is what creates the illusion that something extraordinary has happened. But you know that nothing about this was accidental. Nothing about this was random. It was the result of a long-term relationship with time that was built on intention rather than passivity, on action rather than waiting, on alignment rather than assumption. You were not rushing to get somewhere. You were building something that would eventually move on its own, something that would carry you forward because of the structure you created. And now that structure is doing exactly what it was designed to do. It is supporting your progress. It is amplifying your results. It is allowing you to move at a pace that reflects the accumulation of everything you have done before. You may also begin to see how this changes your perception of time itself, because it no longer feels like something that limits you. It feels like something that expands with you, something that becomes more effective the more intentionally you use it, something that responds to your alignment rather than something you are bound by. You are no longer measuring time in the same way. You are not focusing on how long something takes. You are focusing on how consistently you apply yourself within that time. Because you understand that consistency is what transforms time into results. That repetition is what turns effort into progress. That alignment is what allows everything to move forward in a way that feels natural rather than forced. And this understanding removes a significant amount of pressure, because you are no longer trying to rush outcomes. You are trusting the process that creates them. You are allowing your actions to accumulate without needing immediate validation. You are moving with a sense of confidence that comes from knowing that what you are doing will continue to build as long as you remain consistent. This is also where your independence deepens, because you are no longer comparing your timeline to others. You are no longer measuring your progress against what someone else is doing. You are focused on your own process, your own alignment, your own use of time. And that focus is what keeps you moving forward without distraction, without unnecessary doubt, without the need to adjust your pace based on external expectations. You understand that everyone is engaging with time differently, that everyone is building or not building based on their own actions, and that your results are a reflection of how you have chosen to engage with it, not something that needs to match or align with what others are doing. And this clarity allows you to continue moving with precision, because you are not reacting to external timelines. You are following your own, one that has already proven itself through the results you are experiencing. You are not trying to catch up. You are not trying to compete. You are continuing to build, to refine, to align with the process that has brought you here. because you know that as long as you maintain that alignment, your progress will continue. Your results will continue. Your momentum will continue to grow. And this is where everything comes full circle, because what once looked like a distant vision, something that felt ahead of your reality, has now become something you are living, something you are experiencing, something that continues to evolve as you move forward. And the only reason it appears as if you made a deal with time is because you chose to work with it when others did not. You chose to invest in it when others waited. You chose to align with it when others resisted. And that choice, repeated over and over again, is what created everything you are now seeing. Everything that others are now trying to understand. Everything that proves that you did not bend time. You simply respected it. And in return, it worked with you in a way that now feels almost unreal to those who have not yet experienced what happens when consistency, awareness, and time all come into alignment. And as everything you have built begins to accelerate, as the alignment between your vision, your discipline, your actions, and your relationship with time starts producing results that feel faster, more fluid, and more expansive than anything you experienced in the earlier stages, there comes a phase that is just as important as everything that came before. A phase where the challenge is no longer starting, no longer staying consistent, no longer proving to yourself that what you are doing works, but learning how to remain grounded as everything begins to move at a pace that can easily pull you out of alignment if you are not paying attention. This is where many people lose the stability that created their progress in the first place, because acceleration can create a sense of excitement, a sense of urgency, a sense that now everything must be pushed even harder, even faster, even more aggressively. And while growth may feel like it is expanding rapidly, the foundation that supports that growth still requires the same discipline, the same clarity, the same intentional movement that built it in the beginning. You are no longer in the phase where nothing is happening. You are in the phase where everything is happening. And that shift can be just as destabilizing if you do not remain centered. Because when results begin to appear consistently, it becomes easy to shift your focus from the process to the outcome, from the structure to the reward, from the discipline to the recognition that comes with it. And this is where your awareness becomes critical again, because you must recognize that the same principles that brought you here are the ones that will sustain you here. Not new habits driven by external validation, not reactions to the attention that may begin to surround your progress, but the same quiet consistency, the same intentional use of time, the same alignment with your direction that allowed everything to build in the first place. You may start to notice new opportunities appearing, new paths opening, new possibilities becoming available in ways that were not present before. And while this expansion is a natural result of your progress, it also requires discernment. Because not every opportunity aligns with your direction. Not every path supports your foundation. And if you move without clarity in this phase, you risk scattering the focus that created your momentum. This is where discipline evolves. It is no longer just about doing the work. It is about choosing the right work. It is about maintaining alignment even when there are multiple directions you could take. It is about understanding that growth is not just about adding more, but about refining what you already have so that it continues to expand in a way that is sustainable. You are no longer trying to prove that you can build something. You have already done that. Now you are ensuring that what you build continues to grow without losing its structure, without becoming unstable under the weight of its own expansion. And this is where ego can quietly enter if you are not aware of it. Not in an obvious or negative way, but in a subtle shift where you begin to identify more with the results than with the process. Where you begin to feel that what you have created defines you, rather than recognizing that it is the result of what you consistently do. If that shift happens, it can disconnect you from the very habits that created your success. Because you may begin to rely on what you have already built instead of continuing to build. You may begin to assume that the momentum will carry itself without the same level of intentional input. And that is where progress can slow or become unstable. But if you remain grounded, if you continue to operate from the same clarity that guided you from the beginning, you begin to see that this phase is not about holding on to what you have achieved. It is about continuing to evolve it, to refine it, to strengthen it so that it can support even greater levels of growth without losing its foundation. You may also begin to notice that your environment responds differently now, that people engage with you in new ways, that expectations shift, that attention increases. And while this can feel rewarding, it also requires awareness. Because external attention can easily become a distraction if you allow it to influence your direction. You are not here to perform for others. You are here to continue your process, to remain aligned with what you have built, to use the momentum you have created as a tool for further growth, rather than as something that defines your worth or your identity. This is where your internal stability becomes your greatest asset, because it allows you to move through this phase without being pulled into unnecessary reactions, without being influenced by every external shift, without losing your sense of direction in the presence of increased attention or opportunity. You are still the same person who started this journey. The only difference is that your awareness has expanded, your discipline has strengthened, your results have become visible, and now you are operating at a level where everything you do carries more impact, more weight, more influence. And that makes your alignment even more important. Because small deviations now can create larger effects than they would have before. You are no longer at the beginning where mistakes have minimal impact. You are at a stage where precision matters, where clarity matters, where the way you use your time continues to shape not just your progress, but the direction of everything you are building. And this is where your relationship with time evolves again. Because now it is not just about using it effectively, it is about protecting it, about ensuring that it is not consumed by distractions, by unnecessary commitments, by things that do not align with your direction. Because as your momentum grows, so does the demand on your attention. And without clear boundaries, that demand can dilute your focus, can reduce the effectiveness of the time you have. You begin to understand that saying no becomes just as important as saying yes. That maintaining space for what matters is essential for sustaining growth. That protecting your alignment is what allows your progress to continue without interruption. And as you continue to move through this phase, you begin to feel a deeper sense of confidence. Not the kind that comes from external recognition, but the kind that comes from understanding your process, from knowing that you can build, that you can align, that you can continue moving forward regardless of how the environment changes. Because your foundation is not dependent on those changes. It is built on principles that remain consistent. You are no longer guessing. You are operating with clarity. You are no longer reacting. You are responding with intention. And this is what allows you to sustain the momentum you have created, to continue expanding without losing your center, to grow without becoming unstable. And this is where everything integrates, where your vision, your discipline, your action, your understanding of time, and your ability to remain grounded all come together into a way of moving that is both powerful and controlled, both expansive and stable, allowing you to continue forward with a sense of direction that is not shaken by speed, not distracted by attention, not disrupted by opportunity, but guided by the same clarity that brought you here, ensuring that what you are building continues to evolve in a way that is aligned, sustainable, and fully within your control as you step into everything that comes next. And as you stand within this moment, where everything that once felt distant has now begun to take shape in ways that are visible, tangible, and undeniably real, you begin to understand that what others see as something extraordinary is for you simply the natural result of a process you chose to stay committed to when it was still invisible, uncertain, and easy to abandon. And that realization brings with it a quiet kind of power, not loud or performative, but steady, grounded, and deeply rooted in the experience you have lived through step by step. You did not make a deal with time. You made a decision to respect it, to work with it, to invest into it in a way that most people do not. And because of that, it has returned to you in the form of results that now seem almost unreal to those who did not witness the foundation being built. You begin to see that nothing about this was accidental. Nothing about this was luck. It was alignment, consistency, and a willingness to continue when there was no immediate reward. And that is what separates what you have created from something temporary. Because it is built on something that can be repeated, refined, and expanded as you move forward. There may still be people who question how you got here, who try to label your progress in ways that fit their understanding. But you are no longer affected by that, because you know the truth of your process. You know what it required. You know what it continues to require. And that clarity keeps you grounded even as everything around you continues to shift and evolve. You are not here to prove anything to anyone. You are here to continue, to build, to move forward with the same discipline and awareness that brought you to this point. Because this is not the end of your progress. It is the confirmation of your direction. A moment that shows you that what you saw before it was real was always leading you here. And as you move ahead, carry this understanding with you, not as something you need to explain, but as something you live through your actions, through your consistency, through your continued alignment with the process that works. And if this message connected with you, if you can see your own journey reflected in these words, take a moment right now to like this video, comment, "I'm locked in," and share it with someone who is still in that early phase where nothing makes sense yet. Because what you now understand could be the clarity they need to keep going until their own reality begins to catch up.